city finance in the context of C40, what we do, how we're working on this, and the sorts of things that that we experience. The starting point for this presentation is not that. Yeah, here we go. Right, we're good. So the starting point for this presentation is that we have seen the biggest transfer of powers that's taken place for centuries over the last 50 years. And those powers have transferred from central governments, from national governments, and they've been devolved mostly to cities. And interestingly, across the world, the analysis that C40 does shows that cities have almost universally adopted the same set of powers. Particularly in terms of C40's context, we assess where cities have got powers to take action on climate change. And this list kind of sums up where the responsibility for action now sits with cities, where it maybe previously would have sat with national governments. So that is on, of course, transport, energy, particularly energy efficiency, but also increasingly local level energy generation, waste, economic development, water, adaptation planning, buildings. These are all areas where the responsibility for taking action now lies with the city rather than with the national government. And what that means is that cities now have much of the responsibility for taking action on climate change, even despite the fact that it's national governments that do negotiations on the international level. And so that's why C40 has been set up. And so we are 90 cities around the world, which might not sound like a lot of cities, but in fact that's 15% of the world's population lives in those cities, and 1/4 of the world's economy happens in just 90 cities, which is pretty staggering when you think about the impact that can have. We mostly work with big cities, but we also work with some cities that we call innovator cities, which are cities that we believe are doing really innovative work that other cities can learn from. And here in the Nordics we have Oslo, Stockholm and Copenhagen that we're very proud to have as members. And of course we also take a very active interest in what's happening in other cities, not least Gothenburg, and the amazing work that you've been doing on green bonds here in Gothenburg, which has actually been a driver for action in some of our other cities. Johannesburg and most recently Mexico City have issued green bonds as well, following the lead set by Gothenburg. So you should be very proud of that work that you've done. And so C40, we work with our cities to share ideas, share best practices, communicate with each other, talk about things that have worked, as well as things that haven't worked so well when it comes to taking climate action. And that's both looking at climate change mitigation, so fundamentally reducing carbon emissions, but also climate change adaptation, because many of the things that make cities so successful today are actually some of the greatest climate threats. So vicinity to water for ports and historic trading now means that many cities are in a position where they are subject to potential increases in flooding, in particular as climate change begins to move forwards. And so one of the philosophies of C40 used to be, for a long time we used to say that governments talk and mayors act, and this is a famous picture, I think from the Copenhagen COP, where the governments are sitting around in despair at what they can do, whilst below them are the mayors who are actively joining together. These are mayors from all across the world. This is C40 steering committee. You may recognise the mayor of Copenhagen on the left there, who's one of our active participants in our work. But of course, what we've noticed is that this has changed. At COP21, the world for the first time really did something big and did something important and took some leadership. And we think the most important thing that came out of COP21, as well as obviously the signature of an agreement for the first time around climate change, was the target around 1.5 degrees and the target of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Now, the statistics that came out yesterday showed that yesterday we're looking at an average of 1.1 degrees warming already happening. So we're pretty tight on that 1.5 degree target. And so what that means is huge amounts of action need to be taken if we are to hit that or to meet that 1.5 degree target. And let's be clear, 2 degrees of warming means significant climate change. It doesn't mean, oh, we're okay if we go to 2 degrees. That does mean there will be very significant changes in the way everybody on this planet lives. And so we are committed as cities to keeping or to doing our part, playing our part to keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees. And so in December we published this report called Deadline 2020. And what that shows is we've done an analysis of what the global carbon budget is and how cities can play their part in meeting 1.5 degree target. Now, the scary statistics come first. The scary part is that somewhere between 2020 and 2030, C40 cities on business as usual will have used up all of their budget that can be reasonably allocated to cities, to C40 cities, to allow them to sit in a 1.5 degree world. And that would mean if this happened, and we wanted cities to continue, C40 cities to continue to play their part in 1.5 degrees, every city would need to have 0 carbon emissions from that point onwards, or else we go over 1.5 degrees from a city perspective. The even scarier statistic is that on business as usual, C40 cities alone will use up the entire world's 1.5 degree carbon budget by 2060. And that is the scale of the problem that we're facing. So what we need to do, of course, we need to bend the curve. And that means cutting emissions from the global average right now, 5 tonnes per person, and getting them down to below 3 tonnes per person everywhere. And here in Sweden, you're doing a pretty good job. You've cut emissions. You're now in 2013, which is the most recent stats I could find, you're at 4.6 tonnes per person. That's still quite a bit over 3 tonnes per person, which everybody in the world needs to get to. Now think about this. America is at 16 tonnes per person. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that America is going to be cutting its emissions very much over the next 4 years. And so the rest of the world needs to be picking up some of that slack. And also, we've got to think about the fact that it's easier to cut emissions in urban areas than it is to cut emissions in rural areas. So cities, I think, have got an even stronger role. We know that one of the challenges that investors see is that they don't know the cities because they've not invested in them before. They don't know the type of technology because the things that you're deploying are new. There's electric buses, there's building retrofits, there's other things that are new, that are innovative, and also they don't necessarily know the financing mechanisms that are being used. So if we can find new ways to allow for that innovation within standardized setups that can bring projects together, that can create new pipelines of projects in the long term, we believe that that will have a significant transformative effect on the investors that are wanting to join the market and get more investors excited about the opportunities in cities, particularly when they start seeing that the deals are credible, that they're good, that their due diligence criteria can be met, but also that they're of sufficient scale that they're of interest. And finally, cities need more support to develop their capacity. We work with cities across the world that have amazing ideas. They've got climate action plans that have all the things in them that they need to do, that they want to do. The mayor has politically put their credibility on the line to deliver these climate action plans, and the citizens of the city are engaged in taking action. So we have everything there that we need that can make this work, except the capacity to take those ideas and turn them into projects that people are going to invest in. And that is where, for our developing country cities, we've created the C40 Cities Finance Facility, which is trying to do 3 things with cities. It's trying to help with a lot of technical assistance, take a project and work with the city to get that project right through to financing. It's helping to, at the same time, build the capacity of the city administration, bring in skills, train the city on how to do this themselves, and then take forward that knowledge and share that with cities across the world. We would love to share those knowledge products with you guys. We're working right now with 3 cities. Mexico City wants to introduce 100 electric buses with a long-term vision of replacing every bus in Mexico City with electric buses. Bogota wants to be like a Scandinavian city when it comes to cycling. They look at Copenhagen, they look at here at other parts of the world and say, we want to make everyone, or help everyone cycle to work. The way to do that is to create a new cycle network across the city. And so we're working with them on the starting point of that. And then Jakarta, this is Jakarta on the left-hand side, has got a very serious problem with flooding along this river. And so we're working with them to try and address some of those challenges. But of course, climate adaptation presents a whole new layer of financing challenges and a whole new layer of difficulty because of the different silos within which we tend to operate, and the fact that climate adaptation needs to put all of them together, because here in Jakarta you've got housing, you've got waste, you've got water, and you've got different agencies working with each of those things that need to come together to develop coherent strategies for how to protect the city. Our second big program that we have in the financing, city finance program is our Financing Sustainable Cities initiative. And in London, in a couple of weeks, we've got a Financing Sustainable Cities Forum. This is funded by the City Foundation with support of the World Resources Institute. And we're bringing cities together. We're creating work streams across C40 on all the different topic areas that we focus on that are helping cities to learn from each other on their financing experiences and to bring new technical assistance and expertise into cities to help them to finance their projects. So this is pretty much the end of my presentation. If you join, I'm not going to do a plug for my particular session, which is one of the breakouts next, but I will talk a little bit more about C40's network model, how we bring cities together, and how we share good ideas and best practices between cities. But I hope that's a bit of a taster of some of our thoughts around city finance, and it's really great to be here, and I'd love to chat further during the break.